like this where kids that are in the foster care system, kids that are at risk, that are coming from prison to a halfway area and trying to assimilate back out into the world. And I use my story, hopefully, as an example of inspiration to people that are, and kids and adults and anyone that can get their arms around it and use it as a vehicle, as an example of what you can do with your life no matter where you come from. I think it's much more powerful to do things as an example rather than talk about it. I know a lot of people that talk a good game that never played a good game. So what I like to do is I like to go out and play a good game and just tell it. And if you can get inspired by it, good for you. I'm also here to heal myself. When I was 8 years old, I was removed from my home by the state of California. I was made award of the state for child abuse. My father was an incredibly abusive man who had cancer, kidney disease, and tuberculosis, and knew that he was going to die, and knew that he had kids that were going to be on their own in the world. My mother was mentally unavailable for me. She was insane, clinically insane. She tried to shoot me in the head a couple times because God told her to, and was unavailable most of my life. When I tried to talk to her, she just was unavailable. The children's home that they placed me in, unfortunately, was a good place to be at, but they had very poor hiring practices. And when things were pointed out to them, they didn't act in a way that they would probably act today. And that home was full of pedophiles or child molesters. And I was a victim of that for another 4 years after being a victim of child abuse the hard way. And I watched my mother beat for years. And I ended up with a 6th grade education. I moved 35 times from the time that I started school till the time they removed me from my home. So I was so far behind in school that I just never finished school. I ended up in the United States Marine Corps. It was the very first time that I was rewarded positive for doing something positive. And during my time in the Marine Corps, I graduated #1 out of boot camp, and I also graduated #1 out of 12,000 people out of advanced training. During that time, I met Chuck Norris. I became very close to him. I've been in martial arts since the time I was 3 years old, and I was literally used it to defend myself in the children's home because the children's home that I was in was infant until 18 years old, and everybody was in the same place. My name's Tom Jones. Many times I was in the children's home, and I'd have to fight because of that in the morning. And then when I went to public school in the afternoon, my name was Tom Jones, and I was a kid from the home. Many times I would fight once or twice in a day. When I ended up in the Marine Corps, I would fight in town. I kept training in martial arts, and I was fighting in town. I met Chuck Norris. I ended up as his training partner when I got out of the Marine Corps, and I started fighting professionally. I ended up with 7 titles fighting professionally. I fought 75 times pro. I lost 4 of those fights only. I fought everywhere in the world. I fought on every station that you can fight on, and I've had an incredibly successful career as a fighter. The 75th time they raised my hand, I thought, wow, maybe I should get outside of myself and make it about something more than me. And I had a friend, and I did an appearance at Orangewood Children's Foundation and Orangewood Children's Home here locally, and I was touched to go back in and try to do something to inspire kids that were in the foster system to do great things with their lives because I had 7 titles. I had dinner with princes many times. It was amazing that with a 6th grade education and doing that, I could do that. And I used Chuck Norris as inspiration as well because he would go around and he would speak and he would help people, and he came from dirt and he made something out of himself. So I wanted to do something to help, so I started endurance running. I ran from Oregon to Mexico 3 times.
Wow.
I was involved in buying baseball fields, football fields, soccer fields, and playgrounds for facilities that needed them. It felt so good, I did it again, and I bought vans for battered women. And then in 2001, with 9/11, I ran from Oregon to Mexico again, and I raised $60,000 for the fire department in New York. In 2000, I set a world record. I ran 121 marathons in a row. I ran 26.2 miles a day for 21 consecutive days. One a day for 121 consecutive days. And I just did that with a 6th grade education and a real good work ethic and a plan. Always a plan. And I wanted to show people that I was a better athlete than that. So I got involved in environmental issues, namely plastic degradation in the environment. In particular, particular in the ocean, and I wanted to do something about it. I really couldn't figure out what to do, and I saw this paddleboarding thing in 2006. Well, unfortunately, I was horrible in the water. So I befriended a guy named Laird Hamilton, and I convinced him to teach me how to stand up paddleboard in 2006 when it was brand new. And I decided that I'd do something extraordinary to bring attention to that cause. So I stood up paddleboard in 2007 from Oregon to Mexico, 1,250 miles, and I set a world record with little to no experience on the water, with, again, a good strong work ethic, a goal, and I put together a plan to support that goal that was responsible. In 2010, I broke that world record, and I paddled from Key West to New York City, 1,507 miles, in the same time I paddled 1,250 miles on basically a board with a stick and a wheel. And I made my Y bigger than me. I've always made my Y bigger than me. After the 75th time they raised my hand in the ring, or actually the 71st time they raised my hand in the ring, I've always made my Y more than me and gone out and tried to use it as an example. Not only have I done these things, I've put together the events, I've raised the budgets for them. With a 6th grade education, I go into Verizon and I meet with the CEO of Verizon, and I show him that by having a relationship with me, it will improve their bottom line. And I show them how I've done that for Nike and other Fortune 500 companies, and they respond to that. And I've done all of that, all of it, from coming from the exact same place, or maybe worse than a lot of you. So I'm just using myself and as an example, telling my story. What I plan to do this year, and what I will do this year, is I have a 520-mile paddle planned around the largest man-made lake in America, in Virginia. When I went to Iraq in 2008, which I did, I went to Iraq in 2008 on USO tour. I went on Mixed Martial Arts Superstar tour with some of the people that you see in the UFC every day. And we went to Iraq and went to all the forward operating bases, and we signed autographs and we met the troops. And I was the only one that had former military experience. But when I was in Dulles International Airport, a group of police officers wanted to meet me. And they flew in from all over the nation to meet me because they knew that I had been affected by pedophiles. And they were a group of police officers that were originally assigned to set up task forces that patrol the internet, that basically catch these pedophiles and put them away, these child molesters, and put them away. And they've also have programs that are designed that go out into the community, and they teach mom and dad in the school on what to look out for on the internet, because 88 million kids a day are on the internet, and I know that I have children and I have no idea what my kids are doing. So I was happy to meet these people, and I couldn't figure out what I was going to do to help them. So I started helping them in 2008. So I'm going to paddle around a lake that's in their area and help them raise over $1 million with Shaquille O'Neal, Kathy Ireland, Eric Estrada, and some other well-known actors and sports superstars. And what they are doing, and what I'm helping them raise $1 million for, is that there's police officers and organizations all over the United States that want to go online and work to catch these predators, who I was a victim of for over 4 years. And I can tell you personally, they steal souls and they ruin kids' lives, and not to mention families that are associated with them. So I really wanted to do something to help them. So there's agencies that want to do something that don't have the hardware. So what I'm raising is money for that hardware, the specialized computers that they are using. And everything that I've done, I've wanted to become an expert in. So when I went into running, endurance running through abused and neglected kids, I became an expert in child abuse, because I had to go on CNN and Larry King and do these interviews. And I had to talk responsibly, and I've done the same thing with the environment. And I've done the same thing with the police department. So now consider that. With all of that I just told you, right? I told them if I'm going to support your cause, I need to go and I need to learn about this. So I've gone to every single solitary program that they send a police officer to that would literally go online and do this. So about last time I was in Virginia, they basically gave me my badge. So I'm literally a pastor on the internet. So I've done that as well. And my next endurance paddle that's slated for 2013 is I'll paddle from California to Hawaii. And I'll become the first person to make a trans-Pacific crossing on a paddleboard. project is already funded. It's a science expedition. I'm going out with a group of scientists to do science experiments in the water on plastic degradation. They're going to do a documentary film. And I've got the American public school system to inject that film into the public schools for the ensuing 2 years. You guys are the first generation of kids that are environmentally conscious in the first grade. It's a huge opportunity to affect change that hasn't happened going forward. Say thank you and stuff. For me, it's hard to accept that gratitude because I'm just out busy doing what I'm on a mission to do. So I'm going to paddle across the Pacific Ocean on a paddleboard. Bigger than that, we're making a documentary film that's going into the public school system that will affect change going forward into future generations. Because I thought to myself, what could I do? First of all, that could actually be 100% remedial, and this cause is. And second thing I thought, what could be the most unbelievable form of giving is to leave something to generations of people that you will never, ever meet. And so that's what I'm doing. And I challenge you to do the same or better as me. I challenge you. And I'm here today to motivate, educate, and inspire you. And I've said that before, and I said it in a group of 21,000, and this guy belted out of nowhere. He says, "To do what?" And I looked right back at him, and I said, "You know, to be better tonight when you go to bed than you were when you woke up this morning." And he looked at me and he goes, "That's cool." I was like, "Yeah, that is pretty cool. I can't believe I just said that." Because he hit me out of clear blue stereo. What am I here to do? I'm here to make you better tonight when you go to bed than you were when you woke up this morning before you met me. That's what I'm here to do, and I'm here to do it by example. To put my money where my mouth is. To show you by example what can be done. So again, I'll do now. Chow down. Have a great time. It was wonderful to meet you. If you have any questions for me, I'm more than happy to answer any questions. I think they have some stuff to sign. If you guys want anything for me to sign, I'd be happy to do that.
Pictures.
And then I gotta hit it. Yes.
Hey John, how far is it from California to Hawaii on paddleboard?
That's a great question. As the crow flies, or as a straight line, it's exactly 2,554 miles. It was exactly 3,170 miles running across the continent of North America. I can tell you these things. And the paddleboard doesn't go straight. It goes like this. So it'll be a couple more miles than that, and it'll take 4 months to do that. The scientists will be doing expeditions, experiments every day and taking stuff out of the water while I'm out going across the Pacific Ocean. When I get to Hawaii, there's some very big music artists that are environmentally targeted. They're going to be there, and it's going to be a big thing. It's going to be wonderful for the launch of this documentary film.
Wow, thank you.
You're very welcome. It's my pleasure. You know, and I tell the criminal kids straight out. You know, I'm here for me to heal me. If you guys get anything out of it, good for you. If you don't, you belong here. Because you're quitters. And quitters deserve it. You know, either that or get off your butt and realize that we're in a country that allows anybody to do anything.
What about like dieting? What kind of diet do you have when you go into training?
It's interesting. That's another very good question. I have athletes that are pro athletes that are people that you well know. I mean, Kobe Bryant. I could drop names until I'm purple. And I kind of tease them and say, you know, it must be nice to be in a sport where you can lose 30 games in a season and still make like $1 million. How's that work? And what they do is they're seasonal. So they'll go, season's over. You know, rest, forget it. And then they'll go, oh God, got a season's over. Season's over. And that doesn't promote longevity in my mind. So what I like to do is I like to keep myself in peak physical condition, and I do these events, which happen to be world records that I never ever did anything to be a world record. I just did something to help, and they're like, hey, it's a world record. I'm like, really? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, does that help? And they're like, oh yeah. And I'm like, oh great, world record. So I keep myself physically at this level, and I just have these little blips. So the diet is premium, just in a normal fashion. And then, for example, we're running, right, and we're trying to figure this out. We have to do 120 marathons in a row. I'm like, wow. So what does it take to do this? So we're investigating it. Well, it takes almost 10,000 calories a day to do it.
Oh my.
Well, so I'm like, okay, well, what does 10,000 calories a day look like? Well, they're like, well, 10,000 calories of this kind of food? I'm like, yeah, well, whatever kind of food I'm have to eat. And they're like, Zoom. And I'm like, wow, how is a human going to eat 10,000, how is a human going to eat a whole table full of stuff like that and drink a gallon of water a day? So I have a guy that worked with me my entire fighting career from Thailand. And his family is the most famous family in Thailand's fighting history, and he's a healer. And he tells me, he barely speaks English, he goes, you need to drink, you need to drink, you need to drink. I go, what? He goes, you need to drink. I go, okay, so we blend, or we juice all my fruits and vegetables, or all my vegetables are basically juice, right? So I drink those, and all my fruits are juiced, right, or blended, so I drink all that. My meat's minced, and I can take in 10,000 calories a day and get the water. So I'm like, okay, well, what's the most supercharged water that they have, right? Because I'm looking at water going, that's a lot of water to pound down and be able to run 26.2 miles and do all this stuff. I'm all, do they have supercharged water? And they're like, well, coconut water. And I'm like, okay, tell me about this coconut water. So they tell me that it's the best form of electrolytes and blah, blah, blah. And that's what I'm talking about, a plan, right? So I don't go into this stuff and just, because people say what you do is insane. Well, it is, but if you look at the plan that supports it, it completely is not insane. You know, because again, I keep myself athletically up here all the time. This morning, for example, I got up, I did my juice shake, I ran 10 miles, and I did 200 of the burpees that we were doing over there along that 10-mile route. And I went and I juiced after that, right? My fruits, I juiced all that, had a really good healthy meal. So I'm here now. And then I'll drive to LA and I'll do another thing that's sort of similar to this. You know, so I got a plan that supports what I do. And same thing when I go into corporations. The very first time I met with a company, I met with Vans. You know, the tennis shoe company, Vans. And I met with a guy named Gary Schoenfield, and we were in there in his office. The first time I ever tried to raise money, right? And I did my pitch thing, and so his accountant and everybody's there, and he goes, okay, I want everyone to leave. And I was like, wow, that's the fastest I've been kicked out. And this was my first one, right? So I'm getting my stuff, and he goes, I want to talk to you. So I sat down, and he goes, I like you. He said, if I had 10 people like you, he goes, I could fire the other 499 people that work here, right? That'd be 10,000, I'll never forget it. And I go, wow. I go, okay. And he goes, what do you see on the wall here? And I was like, I see tennis shoes and hats and shirts, and I don't know what that is. And, you know, and he's like, show me how I can sell this stuff, and I'll write you a check for 10,000 bucks. And I go, okay. I go, I don't know how I'm going to do that, but I'll be back. I remember saying that, you know. So I go and I bodyguarded a guy that owned the largest computer memory vending company in the world. And I went to the director of marketing, right, who's making like 250 grand a year. I go, hey, how can I convince this, how can I sell this stuff on the wall? And he goes, there's something brand new called cause marketing. And if you get behind a cause, right, which was what I wanted to do anyway, right? Right? I'm not kidding. This many more of the customers that are buying this stuff will move over to his space, and this many consumers that are considering his product will move to him because it's behind a good cause. I go, really? He goes, yeah. I go, package that. So I called the guy back up, give 5 minutes of his time, show him it. He's like, no way. I'm like, 10,000 bucks? Yeah. He wrote me the check, right? And I've been doing it ever since. Right? So I show companies that buy how associated, because I'm telling them, look, I understand you have to make money to pay your bills and everything, but we're all people, and at the end of the day, I know that you want to sleep good at night. And everyone's like, oh yeah, we do. And I'm like, here's the way we can do it. You know? And they get aboard, and so that's the way that we do these things. And I tell them, look, I'm just using my athletic ability to do worthwhile things, you know? And that is what I'm doing, because I realized all my dreams as an athlete real early. I was like, the 7 titles, I was like, that was supposed to take a hell of a lot longer than that. What am I going to do now? You know, what am I going to do now? And I just decided to go do something bigger than myself. Anybody else? You know, how'd I run across the nation? I put one foot in front of the other, pushed real hard until it was done. Save my head problem.
So what's the biggest mistake you've made personally, and what did you learn from it?
That's a really good question. I think that I've just made mistakes along the way like anyone else. And I think that it's not so much the mistakes that I've made, because we all do, and we all have horror stories, because I could sit down with each and every one of you, and you could tell me your version of my story. But here's the deal, and that's an incredibly good question, but what it is what I've done with it has been different. the way I've handled it. Because that's what separates us as individuals, because we all have trials and tribulations. It's the way that we deal with them that individualizes us. So I think I've made mistakes like all of you guys, you know, and girls, frankly, and I've just done things that are extraordinary with that and decided not to let that be an excuse. I'm going to get to your question in just 1 second. I'll tell you this, and remember this. There's one thing and one thing in common that every single person that quits in life and loses in life has in common. There is one thing they all have in common. Can anyone tell me what it is?
Fear.
That's one thing, but it's not the only thing they all have in common, because I met some people that aren't afraid of anything. Yes?
What was it?
They tried?
They're trying. Okay, that's not the deal. What of all the people that kind of given up on their dreams or losers or whatever, or bank robbers, or they all have one thing in common. No, they all have one thing in common. Okay, I haven't heard it yet.
They don't feel comfortable. Education?
They all have a litany of excuses why. They have a volume. They have Encyclopedia Britannica, reasons why they failed, couldn't do it. This person, my teacher, I got molested. There's so many compartments. They all have a litany of excuses of why they haven't climbed Mount Everest. And I walk right by them. They go, "What are you doing?" I go, "I'm climbing Mount Everest." You know why? They talk themselves right out of it. Yes.
Why would you give up your time to help other people?
Because it's the right. That's the best question I've been asked in so long.
Yeah.
And okay. Very early on. That's one. What's your name?
Owen?
Owen.
Owen.
Owen. I'm going to remember your name. Ask me that question one more time.
Why would you give it time to help other people?
Because I just got 15 seconds of your attention, Owen. That's why. That's why I do things that are extraordinary. Because people go, "Why would you do that?" And right at that second, they say, "Why would you do that, Owen?" Guess what? I have their undivided attention. And that attention span has varied in length, believe me. But I have their attention most of the time for at least 15 seconds. And I talk to them about doing something bigger than yourself, getting outside of yourself and doing because it's the right thing to do. That's what that's a golden rule. If we all did that, Owen, there would be absolutely no problems in the world whatsoever. That's why. Because I'm trying to inspire you, Owen, why I got your attention, why I got you wondering why. Because I want you to do better than me. And I want the world to be a better place. That's my only reason, and that's why I succeed. That's why I've been the only person, Owen, that has paddled from Oregon to Mexico. I'm the only human that's ever paddled from Key West, New York. I'm the only human that ran 121 marathons in a row so far. Because I got your attention. Why would I do that? Because I want to make the world a better place. That's a great question. I'm going to remember you. Okay.
So guys, if you guys have a photo and you want to get an autograph, why don't we make a line and maybe you can, if you want to sit down.
Yeah. If somebody, I didn't bring a Sharpie.
Yeah, we have a Sharpie.
And thank you guys and girls. Thank you folks very much. Okay, thanks. Can I ask you, Robert?